Welcome to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I'm Kelly Noonan-Gorse, and every week I speak to the leading doctors, healers, spiritual teachers, and scientists to find out what is truly possible when it comes to healing. I also interview real people with extraordinary healing stories. My philosophy is, what's possible for one is possible for all. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful journey of remembering our divine nature and tapping into the truths that shall set us free. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I am just over the moon, thrilled to have Marianne Williamson here with me today, back on the podcast in this really, perfect time to be alive. We are in the fire of transformation, and she has written this new book. It's called The Mystic Jesus, The Mind of Love, and much like a return to love for me when I read it at 19 years old and completely changed the course of my life and got me aligned to my spiritual truth. I think this book, The Mystic Jesus, is coming at the perfect time again for me and the collective. So Marianne, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's always great to talk to you, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit about Marianne Williamson, if you don't know, but obviously she was in Heal. And for more than 4 decades, Marianne Williamson has been a leader of spiritually progressive circles. She is the author of 16 books, 4 of which have been #1 New York Times bestsellers. And a quote from the mega bestseller, A Return to Love, which is what I mentioned before, that you might have heard is, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." And that is considered an anthem for a contemporary generation of seekers, of which I consider myself to be. So let's just dive in and talk about the Mystic Jesus. How did this book come to you, and why now?
Well, actually, this book came about because I got a call from my editor who said, we get phone calls from booksellers saying people keep asking for books about Jesus that aren't books about Christianity. He said, "Isn't that kind of what you talk about?" I said, "Yeah," as someone who has written and spoken about A Course in Miracles. The Course in Miracles uses traditional Christian terms, including a conversation about Jesus, from whom the book came, but in decidedly non-traditional psychotherapeutic ways. Jesus in the Course in Miracles is seen as an elder brother, a kind of evolutionary elder brother, someone who has actualized fully the divine potential that is within all of us. And having done so, has been authorized by God to help the rest of us. Should we request it? If we don't request it, that's fine too. That's up to our own free will. This is not this book is not about the historical figure, a man who lived 2,000 years ago, which is obviously an extraordinarily important, powerful topic on the planet. This, however, is about a non-exclusive spiritual force of consciousness, which is not given birth in a manger 2,000 years ago, but also given birth into the world in any moment that our hearts are open in love to one another. So it's about taking the story of his life and applying it as a kind of psychological guidance system to the lives that we're living right now. And that's what the Course in Miracles, that's where it takes the conversation around him. And I was thrilled to have the opportunity to write the book.
I mean, everything you talk about, whenever I'm asked, like, who would you meet throughout time? Who would you sit down with and ask questions? It's, I was raised Catholic, but the religion side, the rules and the regulations and the guilt and the shame and the judgment, none of that resonated. Or after a while, it got very burdensome. But I always resonated with the stories of Jesus. And I just had this knowing early on that he was teaching us not from a superior place, but from a place of, I've tapped into what it means to be a spiritual person, having a human incarnation. I've remembered my divinity, and I'm here to show you that it's possible for you as well.
Yes, he says in the Course, "I am in a state that is only potential in you. I don't have anything you don't have. The difference between us is I don't have anything else." And what you experience is what so many millions of people have experienced. I don't want the doctrine. I don't want the dogma. I don't want the institutional organized religion and all of the stuff that goes with that. But I don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater. It's not like I'm trying to disconnect with God. Many people have come to feel that the institution that purports to broker their relationship with God has actually done more to disconnect than to connect them with the actual experience. And that's what I think people are yearning for today. Too often Jesus has come to feel like something on the third floor of a big museum under glass in this musty room. And there's a sense, can he be liberated from all that? St. Augustine said this is ever ancient, ever new. And I also feel, Kelly, that it's part of a larger thing going on the planet. We are rethinking everything, rethinking politics, rethinking our relationship to nature, rethinking food, rethinking medicine, obviously, rethinking healing. And so the rethinking of spirituality and religion is very much a part of that larger, I think, evolutionary impulse of the species, by which we seek to individuate from certain systems we inherited, but now we're sorting through and going, well, what do I want to keep and what do I want to drop? What do I want to regreen? What do I want to make new and give new life? And that's what I think is happening with Jesus, as with so many things.
And I feel that, everything that I'm talking to with, and you mentioned this in Return to Love, but it's just now coming back around. And I love how you talk about back when you wrote that book, you talked about forgiveness, and your biggest example of forgiveness back then was having to forgive someone who stood you up to a date to the Olympics, and like, I just love that you're so vulnerable in that book, because we think we know so much at every phase of life. And it's about this, like everything that's coming to my consciousness is about dropping from the head and the ego and this story and this narrative based on our conditioning that's causing our suffering. The circumstances are just the circumstances, divinely orchestrated by, magnetics and quantum physics and, destiny and purpose. But it's our story about them based on our fears and wounding that causes the suffering. So everything that I'm aware of right now, and your book kind of nails it, is dropping from the mental sphere, the ego and the fear, into the heart and being into and coming from love and coming. And when you drop into the heart, there's just, you just have this expansiveness. You're able to respond to life and see rather than react out of this fear and wounding, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the Course in Miracles says enlightenment begins as abstract concept and then makes a journey without distance from the head to the heart. James Doty, the neurologist and neurophysician over at Stanford Medical School, talks about how scientists have realized now that there is a connection between the brain and the heart, a kind of highway and partnership that they didn't even used to recognize. It used to be believed that the brain alone was the intelligence center of the body. Now they realize the two together are the intelligence center of the body. And it seems to me that's true about our lives. It's true about our society. The brain disconnected from the heart is not intelligent. It is not healthy. It can lead to dysfunction as much as to function. And I think that journey of enlightenment is coming to be seen as a very experiential, practical journey that we take every day of our lives, every moment of our lives, when we either make the enlightened decision or the unenlightened decision, meaning every moment we're choosing, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. Will my heart be open or will I be in withhold? Will I have a barrier over my heart or will I have an open-hearted, gracious response to whatever is happening in this moment? And all thought, the idea here, of course, is that thought is so powerful. All thought creates form on some level. And that whatever you think, cause and effect, means you will set a trajectory of events according to that thought. So Jesus becomes a psychological guide, an internal teacher, like with your attitudinal muscles, just like you hire a trainer to help you in the gym. He's like helping you train your attitudinal muscles. Go for the gracious thought, not the cynical thought, the loving thought, not the judgmental thought. And it is living in this world about retraining our muscles, because there's emotional gravity, just like there's external physical gravity. If you're not working at keeping those muscles up, they're headed down. And the idea of someone to help, someone to guide, someone who is that elder brother who has already gotten there, and then been authorized by God to help us if we so choose. The Course is not saying he's the only name on the door of that portal to unconditional love, but if he's yours, you come to know it, and if he's yours and you do feel that way, I hope this book is helpful.
I love that. And every time while I'm listening to the book, and I love listening to the book because your voice, you've been such a warrior, you're a spiritual warrior, a light warrior, but you've gotten this, and I remember, I will never forget this in our last interview. It was around COVID and I was really like amped up about, just the censorship and the fear and you said, if you have a child under 5, you get a pass from having to be an activist because that energy it's a certain energy that you're calling into your life. And right now you should be creating and molding this sacred, conditions for your child. And I've always remembered that. Now she's 5, so like I'm even out the door.
Come back, Kelly.
I'm back. But I want to reflect back to you. My friend Andrea Quinn and I were talking. She introduced you at Marcy Cole's First Tuesday the other night. But she there's just a change in, like, you're stepping into this feminine softness of just like, you're almost just, rather than needing people to understand because of the collective fear of where this world is going if we don't all step up and be the change that we wish to see. I don't know. There's just this like beautiful feminine like gravity to your voice and the way you. So I've been enjoying listening to you speak about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, talk about the sacred morning. Another part in Heal that I often refer to is how important mental hygiene is. And it's your quote: "We shower off the gunk of our day physically. It's just accepted in society that we must do so in order to stay healthy and socially acceptable. But it's so important to do the mental, spiritual hygiene so that we can set the tone of the day and have more space to respond and more of a connection with the divine so that we have more compassion and grace with other people and what's going on." So talk about the sacred morning.
Well, you wake up in the morning, you have dirt on your body, you have, gunk on your body. You take a shower, you take a bath, you brush your teeth. But we also have stress on our minds. And it's not only our own stress, we're picking up stress from people all over the world. And of course, you want to purify your body before you go out into the day. But if you don't purify your mind through prayer, through meditation, or through reflection, through mindfulness, whatever your practice is, if you don't align your nervous system with that holy place within yourself, the holy place within yourself is the whole place within yourself, the healed and whole and healthy place within yourself. The spiritual path, the Course in Miracles says that their peak psychotherapy and religion are the same thing. It's about healing the mind. So we are living particularly at a time right now when the cacophony of the world, social media, the mean-spiritedness of this time, all of it's like assaulting us 24/7. And if you wake up in the morning and you just give yourself over to that and you go immediately to the news or to social media or whatever, you're just saying to the craziness of the world, come on, eat me alive. Here's my nervous system. Here's my brain. Take it. And then there's no reason to be mystified why you're depressed by noon. So taking that time in the morning to, just like in yoga, when you train your muscles into correct positioning, you train your mind into correct positioning. What is correct positioning? I am here as an instrument of love. I'm only here to extend love. May everyone that I meet today feel blessed on some level. Where would you have me go? What would you have me say? What would you have me do? And what do you want me to say to whom? You just align yourself. You get on the spiritual wagon. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to be enlightened masters throughout the day. It doesn't mean we're never going to fall off, but the probability of our falling off is less. And when we do fall off the wagon, we get tempted, we get upset about something, we get scared about something, we can put ourselves back up. We're developing attitudinal musculature. And it's no different than physical exercise. If you do it, it works. If you don't do it, it doesn't work. If you do those accumulated repetitions of positivity, It's anti-emotional gravity. And I think everybody has come to realize, whether it's about food, whether it's about exercise, we're kind of at a point, Kelly, and I think this is now true about spirituality also. We all know these things. The era of data collection is over. Now it's a time of application, and application on a more sober and serious level than ever before. The world needs each of us right now to show up at our best, at our most powerful. So this is not just about, oh, so that I'll have mental health. It's also so I, in my mental state of mental health, will be a major contributor to this evolutionary leap that absolutely we must make right now.
So talk a little bit about, because I there's so many places I want to go with this, but I'm in awe of the state of the world, just in the example of what went down politically last week, and how we are so divided with two sides saying that the other side is unhinged or lost their mind or asleep. And like both sides think the other side is completely ignorant and asleep. And it's like it's back to that, obviously there's a lot of fear that has infected this, zeitgeist and the collective, but and social media algorithms is, feeding this and feeding you more of what you believe, and putting fuel on the divisive fire. But give us your perspective on how to come back into unity when there's so much wrong making, where I'm just trying to stay neutral and go like, this like patriarchal pimple popping, like systems need to break down. It may not look like how we think it should look like. It's certainly not pretty or perfect, but you know, I don't know. I'm just trying to stay neutral, and I'm just in awe of this, like the both sides thinking the other side is crazy and completely wrong and asleep and ignorant.
Well, I don't think it's about neutrality. It's about realizing that both sides are right about that. Um, in a free society, we don't all have to agree. Nobody owes it to you to agree with you. Where there is so much meanness at people for having the audacity to not agree with me. And that kind of arrogance, that kind of self-righteousness is on the left and on the right. So with everything, it's the issue of what are you demonstrating? And that's honor. That's respect for people. I notice in politics a lot these days, there are people I don't agree with that are making some important points. And people that I agree with on policy who are acting like absolute jerks. So I think all of us have to step back and remember what is happening in this country. In a free society, everybody gets to have their opinion. Nobody has a monopoly on truth, and nobody gets to own this country. I mean, even when one side wins an election, that doesn't mean the rest of us don't have a voice. I mean, that's what a free society is. And I think at this point, it's always the change in us. It's to eschew the mean-spiritedness that's out there. Do you know what I mean? I
Yes.
mean, nobody, no president, no administration is going to do everything right, everything wrong according to any one person's view. And elections have consequences. I was certainly in the belly of the beast, so I have a lot of opinions about that. And I feel on my side of the aisle, not having voted for Trump, a lot of the people who were most excited, who were most upset about it, did nothing over the last year and a half to really help us provide what I think would have been a compelling alternative. So I think everybody has to look at ourselves right now and do our part. The majority of Americans, if you actually look at the polls and you actually look at issues, we are not so divided. We're not. A majority of Republicans, as well as Democrats, not as big a majority, but a majority, want universal health care. A majority of Republicans, as well as Democrats, not as big a majority, but a majority, want tuition-free college and tech school. A majority of Americans do want the environment taken better care of. A majority of Americans do want fair taxation. So we're living at a time when the real dichotomy is not between left and right. So much of that is created, like you said, by the algorithms, by media that's taking advantage of all that. And that's not the way. The miracle comes from love. The miracle comes from mutual honor and respect. Obviously, on both sides of the political aisle, obviously, there are fringe extreme elements that should concern any of us. But that's not where the majority of Americans live if you actually talk to one another. If
Yeah.
you actually talk to one another. And I think we need to not only be talking to the people that we know already agree with us.
Totally. I have wonderful friends, family members that I'm extremely close to that I consider extremely intelligent, and we may not see eye to eye. And I believe that this situation is helping us go, okay, bringing us back to like, let's love the human regardless of what's going on. It's like,
Absolutely.
this is not meant to break up relationships I've had forever.
But
Like,
it
let's let
has,
all of that play out and still be friends on the human level. That's not what dictates our life, you know?
when I was growing up, we had these Sunday morning breakfasts, right? So this is the kinds of things that would be said. My uncle would say, kids, don't listen to your father, you'll never make a dime. My father would say, kids, don't listen to your uncles, they'll not survive the revolution. And then my mother would come in, okay, who wants whitefish? Who wants roast beef? I mean, it was like there was a sense of humor in those days. It was a sense of humor.
Where did it
And
go? Yeah.
well, it was actually we were trained out of it. There's a wonderful book by Matt Taibbi called Hate Inc.
Mm.
And he talked about how it was first Roger Ailes who realized, wow, there's a lot of money to be made in creating this crossfire mentality. And then on the left, they did it too with MSNBC. I remember years ago, I was at the US Capitol and I was meeting Dennis Kucinich there. And we were going upstairs to have lunch in the House dining room. At that time, it was during the Clinton impeachment trials. And one of the people who was the most, a surrogate on television a lot was then Congressman, now Senator Lindsey Graham. And he was just pounding on Clinton and pounding on Clinton and pounding on Clinton. So I'm with Dennis Kucinich, who is a major peace, Department of Peace person. So we're waiting. The elevator door opens, and there's Lindsey Graham, and I'm immediately bristling because I'm watching him on television be so awful to Clinton. And I watch these two bros. Hey, how you doing, Dennis? Hey, how you doing, Lindsey? And they're like hugging, and I'm like, I'm just like, how could he even talk to him, right? So Lindsey Graham gets out of the elevator, the doors close, and Dennis says to me, "What's with you?" I said, "Dennis, he's like saying horrible things about Clinton every single night." He said, "Oh, Marianne, that's just on television. We all just do that on television. We're good friends. He and I have worked on a lot of stuff." So I thought, oh, great. Look how this has poisoned this country.
Mm.
They on television they act one way. And of course, at this point now, because of all that, it's not even just on television. So we have to go back to cultivating our own healthy patterns. And that has as much to do with healthy relationship patterns as anything else. I know when Clinton was not when Trump was elected the first time, I have two close girlfriends who are Trump supporters, and I know millions of Americans went through this. We had to work at it and find the place to protect the sacred bonds of affection. And we did.
Yeah, I love it. As we're talking about this, it's so clear that, the people on the left that feel so genuine fear that Trump is in office and their rights are threatened and, all of the things that they're fearing, they feel powerless. So they come out in a defensive anger and righteousness. And so all of that, and I've just come through most intense emotional period of my life. I haven't really talked about this publicly, but I'm separated from my husband and going through a divorce, and
Oh,
I've
I'm
had
so
to, it's like
sorry.
rocked my foundation. I've had to just really look at, even though it's my kind of initiation, just really like looking at my ideas of security and safety and really, knowing that my hypothesis or my conclusion about healing is that it's all a remembering of where we come from and who we are, these perfect, divine, whole spiritual beings coming into this 3D illusion of separation, having this human experience, which comes with tremendous pleasure and tremendous pain and suffering. And so I just want to encourage, it's just such a powerless place to be so reactive to this external political climate, the world. Like you said, we still have our voice. We have so much power. So I think, my work recently is just finding the safety and security in myself, which only comes from this belief that life is for us and never against us. It's happening for us, not to us. And this connection to the Christ consciousness of grace and having those practices to keep me connected and calling in with prayer, which every time you read a prayer or suggest a prayer in the audible version, it just brings peace over my body. So I guess I just want to ask about that, like the miracles. The Course in Miracles talks about it's just a shift in perception. It's a healing of your perception. It's a cleansing of the lens through which we're looking through, and that's when the spiritual practices, what they do every morning, it's just cleansing the lens and getting us back into that connection of who we really are.
The only thing I would add to that is including other people. The key is the human being in front of you or the human being you're even thinking about. You can't have that peace just by thinking you can connect with God, but leave out other people. I remember in Les Mis, there's that lyric, to love another person is to see the face of God. So I think we've all been through that period where other people don't matter. I'm looking for my relationship with God. But our relationship with God is in our relationship with other people. Our willingness to bless other people, our willingness to atone and take responsibility when we ourselves have wronged other people, our willingness to forgive people who made mistakes in regard to us. It's a gritty path at times, a messy path at times, but the Course in Miracles presents life as though it's intentional. Like when you said it's happening for you, not to you. It's happening for you in that every situation carries within it a possibility and a temptation. Every situation, and the Course in Miracles points us out that every circumstance is a relationship. There are always people involved in that somehow. You are invited by every situation. Hey, you know where you do it well? You could do it even better. Hey, you are invited in this situation to expand, to open, to even be better than you've ever been. However, the situation will also tempt you to fall back into ego default patterns. So it's a moment by moment. Am I showing up? Am I being my best? Am I recognizing that something sacred is happening here? If I bring the sacred into it, two people join together, for instance, okay, you and me, you bring your talents, I bring my talents. Couldn't be happening unless both of us were here. And then what's the consciousness? Is the consciousness to really hold a space, hoping the other does well too, so that we can exponentially increase what either one of us could do by ourselves? Or are you looking at it like you're just not kind of totally present? You're hoping what you might get out of it. I mean, and then life will unfold according to which decision we make consciously or unconsciously. So yeah, life is happening for us, but the fact it's happening for you doesn't mean it's going to be easy if you don't show up for it.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
And which brings us into forgiveness, because it
Right.
is such a gritty path. Like I'm in this situation where this person completely, there's deception, there's lies, there's attack, there's extortion, like just really, my ego self is like, wants to just strangle this person who's doing all this stuff to me and or to us or to whoever. And I wish I could come up with a better example, but I want to use a real life example because I'm in it and I can see the gifts in the circumstance. And so I've gotten to a place where I'm like, okay, this is happening. I'm looking at the mirror of what it's reflecting back to me as far as like where perhaps I've abandoned myself or I have not been truthful or honored myself or whatever it is that it's teaching me. I see the gift in the circumstance because it's propelling me to take action in a certain direction. But I'm not quite forgiving the person yet because there's such a vile human in my mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like
Yeah,
how
I definitely know what you mean.
is
Yeah,
it
try running
important to forgive that person? I'm trying to look at them like a role in this divine drama that my soul's orchestrated for itself, for its growth. And so like I can get there and like kind of put some separation, but I really just want to knock her in the face, you know?
The answer is yes, but not immediately.
Okay.
It's a journey. So try running for president of the United States.
Oh, I know, girl.
Everybody's going through it right now. I don't know anybody who's not going through this major crucifixion of self.
Mm.
And the crucifixion pattern is when the ego mind, somebody's lovelessness would invalidate your love and invalidate your truth and seek really to destroy you on some level. Everybody's going through it right now because it's like everybody's got their own personal Armageddon, and who we are becoming because of it is going to be better than we were before it even happened. But you have to see it, and I think that you do see it the way you described it. The experience itself is a sacred crucible. So this is the moment, and I know you know all this. Watch the food you eat, make sure you exercise, watch drugs and alcohol, be careful, because you need all of your faculties that could possibly help you hold this with grace, because this is a perfect example of what I mean. If you can handle this with grace, think how much more advanced you will be. And if you fall back into old patterns, then you will actually conspire in creating a repetitive pattern on the other side of this. Like you said, the point is to learn, to atone for your own mistakes. The Course in Miracles says you have to take 100% responsibility for your life experience. If you don't, then the price you pay that will be that you won't be able to change it. And I think you indicated that already. How did I conspire with this? Where was I was I willing to play along and go blind because I didn't want to see? Where did I sell out myself? Where did I not show up? You know, it's hard. It's hard. It's not just forgiving the other person, too. It's forgiving yourself. And even in forgiving the other person, saying, how did I let that person in the room? How did I? Right. And it takes time. And that's represented metaphysically by the 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection, which is also in the Old Testament, the 40 years in the desert.
Mm.
Now, this is the thing to remember. And I know you know this. I know that this would not be new to you. Only have the most sacred friends around you at the time. You want to process this, but not spew it. You want to honor your feelings, but not indulge your feelings. It really takes it's a surgery of the soul, right? Now, this is the thing. You go into the tomb, you're crucified, you go into the tomb, and in that tomb, in the cave, is when you're processing it, you're doing all that we're talking about, right? In the dark, in the darkness of this sacred space. When the women come to get the body of Jesus after 3 days, the angels, thoughts of God, say, oh, he's not here. He's risen. What does that mean? That means Kelly will be molecularly rearranged. You do this work, you won't even be the same Kelly. And you sure as hell won't be a Kelly who's open to that stuff again.
Correct.
And that's what forgiveness will grant you. But I think, it's what we used to call the dark night of the soul. And, I was talking to my friend, Mary Morrissey, and she was talking about that book and St. John and Dark Night of the Soul. And she was talking about the fact that it's not if it happens, it's when it happens. And if you are really close to people around you right now, everybody's going through stuff. And of course, because of the political situation, we're all a part of this major crucifixion of the United States. Our karma's up, right? But so it's the same thing collectively that we're going through personally. So I wish you well, but I also, when I was in college, we were all reading the Carlos Castaneda books. Did you ever read the Carlos Castaneda books? I
I
think that was
know.
before your time. Okay. So we were all reading these books about this Mexican, really, they were Mexican magicians. They were amazing. And this Don Juan was his name. And then the women were Taisha Abelard and I forgot the other one. Anyway, it's a marvelous Mexican magic tradition. So Carlos Castaneda has this shaman, Don Juan. So one day he goes to see Don Juan and he tells Don Juan about this neighbor who was the most horrible thing And he was so rude to him and he was so mean and he sabotaged and he undermined and he was absolutely horrible. So Don Juan tells, no, Carlos Castaneda tells Don Juan the story and he looks and Don Juan starts dancing and singing. This is fantastic. This is so great. And Carlos Castaneda is, what do you mean? I'm telling you, this is the worst person in the world. He said, when you find that person who pushes your buttons that much, triggers you that much, that means you have that much of an exponential potential to learn. So see this, even this is sacred, but you can't rush it. You can't. The forgiveness, I'll tell you something. The other night, I was thinking about someone in my life with my situation that I went through, and forgiveness has been particularly hard. And, if only, I could go on and on.
Yes.
So one night I said a little prayer and I start scrolling and I see Wayne Dyer with Nick Ortner doing a tapping exercise. I forgive. I don't want to forgive, but I will forgive. All this tapping. I don't, and I saw Wayne Dyer. I don't want to forgive, but I will forgive. I don't want to do it, but I will do it. I don't want to do it. And it was, thank you. Thank you. But it takes time. It's the season of your pain. I wrote a book called Tears to Triumph a few years ago about that dark night of the soul and about suffering and about what Buddha says about it, what the story of Moses says about it, what the story of Jesus. And I open with a line from Rilke, let me not squander the hour of my pain. This is a sacred time in your life. As painful as it is, this too is sacred.
Yes, and I see how it's just lining up. I want to do the next film about emotion, and I'd love to ask you further, like how you process in the tomb, because we're never given, we kind of are starting to understand the nervous system and how when we get triggered, we're in fight or flight, and we can't heal when we're in sympathetic. We've got to get it back into parasympathetic, but everybody's in sympathetic nervous system all the
But
time
that's
because we're
what
overstressed.
but that's what meditation and prayer are about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what meditation, prayer, mindfulness, these ancient techniques in some cases, that's what they do for us. You can't think yourself into a different place in your nervous system. You can't, it's not an intellectual shift. But this is an example of what I meant, Kelly. We do know what to do. This is exactly what I meant. Don't go dumb at a time like this. Don't coddle within yourself any even momentary thought that you haven't lived your entire life gaining the skills for just such a moment as this. And now it's about applying them. And the crucifixion, what could be, whether it's slavery of the Israelites or whether it's the crucifixion of Jesus, serious spiritual principle speaks to human suffering. In the story of Siddhartha in Buddhism, it's when he crossed over the walls of his father's compound and saw suffering for the first time. That's when his enlightenment began. So you honor your suffering too. And one of the things about St. John of the Cross and Dark Night of the Soul is that you encounter aspects of yourself that you love and that you realize, I'm being strong here. I'm burning through this because I could get on the phone. I could text. I could tweet. And I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing it, right? And you end up feeling on the other side of this, that part of me that I'm gaining from this, I want to take with me.
Yeah, I've been really loving this quote by someone named Andrea Dijkstra, I think, and it's in order to love yourself, you can't hate the experiences that shaped you. And
Good point. That's a good one. Yeah, that's it. Exactly.
I love it so much.
Exactly.
So you touch on the Mystic Mary in
Yeah.
the book, and I feel like, again, as we step into the age of Aquarius, and I know a little bit about a lot of those things, this kind of rise of this like feminine energy, this heart energy, and the Dalai Lama said the world would be saved by the Western woman. I just speak to that as because I do feel like we need a large dose of love and soft femininity, strong femininity, but soft.
Well, we've all heard people say that every figure in your dream is an aspect of yourself. And so what the book deals with is the idea that every figure in these religious stories is an aspect of yourself. Mary would be seen as that divine feminine, the humanness, the human heart impregnated by God, then giving birth to the Christ self, giving birth to the expression of your best self, which is you, mothered by your humanness and fathered by God. But don't forget, Joseph is the divine masculine. I think sometimes we forget there's not just a divine feminine, there's also a divine masculine. And the divine masculine is the part of the personality that makes sure you navigate with the material world while you're going through this pregnancy of your better self. You're still taking care of yourself, even while you're going through this. You're taking care of your child, you're paying the rent, whatever, right? The mortgage, whatever. And so it's that balance. So Mary, yes, represents that feminine aspect inside us all. I remember a quote from Yoko Ono saying the spiritualization process is a feminization process. But the feminine, as you also said, is fierce. She's not, the divine feminine is more than cut velvet shawls and dancing under the moon. She is stop right there if you're hurting that child. She stop right there if you are harming this planet that I intend for my grandchildren to live on. So I think that the women sometimes are afraid to show our fierceness because the world projects onto it. That's the whole witch burning thing. The wise women were called witches, and they were all that the idea of evil was projected onto them because they were representing a power that the patriarchy had not allowed. It had not gone through the patriarchal's permission system, right? So the patriarchy loves a girl as long as we're nice girls.
We're not a threat.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think we want to be careful with that because the patriarchy will call it anger, right? When really the same behavior in a man is called one thing and a woman it's called, oh, she's angry or she's bitchy, right? So there's a fierceness, I think, to the divine feminine. She's not kidding. You have a child, you said you have a 5-year-old. Anybody that has children, but particularly around adolescence, usually having to do with drugs, alcohol, sex. If you sense, and in every advanced mammalian species that survives and thrives, a common characteristic is fierce behavior on the part of the adult female of the species if she senses a threat to her cubs. Like black bears, for example, lions, tigers, they'll leave you alone. You even go near their babies, they're coming after you. And it could be argued that there's something very dysfunctional about the human species right now, that we are as relatively complacent in front of some of the threats, profound threats to the human young. So this fierce part of us is called for now in this rise of the divine feminine. And I think for every woman to realize, when you really have the divine feminine rise within you, do not expect for the patriarchy to like you. Don't expect it. And that's why this whole idea of the divine feminine, which really is just a spiritual aspect of feminism, has got to include sisterhood. It's got to include sisterhood. None of us are going to make it unless all of us make it. And that's what I think is really an important aspect of that conversation, that if you're really going to go out there as a woman and you are really going to seek to disrupt the patriarchy, you will not always be approved of. All kinds of casting, like I felt on my campaign almost like it was like witch burning. This is how old, this stuff is ancient. She's crazy. You can't listen to her. She's crazy. I'm sure you've gotten some of that with your work. I mean, a book that you would probably love is Barbara Kingsolver. No, Barbara Ehrenreich, please forgive me. Barbara Ehrenreich years ago wrote a book about the witches. I remember saying to somebody in left-wing politics about Barbara Ehrenreich writing a book about the witches. And this person said, oh, she would never have written a book about that. I said, you might want to check that out online. She sure as hell did. And what she talked about was how these women who knew about the medicinal power of herbs, knew about plants, knew about a divine connection to nature, as the very genesis of what we would one day know as Western scientific medical models were emerging, the wisdom of these women that was not vetted by those systems was considered a threat. So I think that that's a really important thing about the rising power of women today. The system is fine with a woman being empowered as long as she reads from the old script.
Mm.
As long as she reads from the old script, then that's great. Look good, honey. And like, look at the Statue of Liberty. Given where we are today, we love the Statue of Liberty. Why don't you read that poem by Emma Lazarus on the statue? Give me your hungry. Give me your tired. Give me your masses yearning to be free. Are we living at a time when we're going to practice that, or should we take it down? Because right now we just love the statue. She looks wonderful, but it's what she says.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's time for us to move on now from some of the easy conversations, like, oh, the rise of the divine feminine. I know that I'm not probably you share this, how many times you meet men who say they love the divine feminine, but they clearly have a problem with real women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am meeting
Right?
more and more. Well,
Uh-huh.
not more and more, but
Uh-huh.
I'm meeting actually like men who are in their heart, and there's going to be more that are, reverent and fine. I don't know. Like I'm getting shown examples, not
Right.
romantically, but like especially
Well,
in
that's
a
what.
business partner. And it's really like, and I think for me, I'm seeing so many like this example of this woman, that's I want to strangle. I've been seeing so many, kind of the wrong end of the Me Too movement. Again, these women are driven by fear, and for me, it's like I've been doing all this healing work to come back to myself, heal my wounds, so that I can, understand my innate value rather than this story of people pleasing and perfectionism and, external validation for worth, and really drop into that divinity so that and then when you're there, you can stand, you emanate a different strength because you're in a knowing and you're not efforting out of fear. And that's what I still have fear based on the state of the world and like speaking up, but I'm stepping into more and more of just like, this is my truth. These are my priorities, my child being the number one. And it feels really good. So
Well, also, it's hard to stay in this loving center or place when you're under attack, because constant and abuse and attack, which will be directed at the woman who truly stands up to disrupt the system, puts you in a state of we talk about post-traumatic stress, but present traumatic stress.
mm,
You know, all the more reasons why to remember women at the when Jesus was crucified, there were women who were at the cross, women who came to get to the body. And in our crucifixions in life, that's your women friends. Even if the crucifixion comes through a woman, which often it does, because of how much women have, in this culture today, particularly, really internalized the misogyny and internalized the patriarchy. And they're the first ones to throw the stone. It's very unfortunate. That's
yes.
why we have to raise our girls to understand this sacred responsibility, not just to themselves. There's a lot of that in America today. Girl, understand your worth. But we have to teach our girls and understand the worth of every girl around you, too.
Mm,
And to teach our sons as well. We have to be there for each other. So much of the conversation that we have now, including the spiritual conversation, is still about me.
hmm
It got to equally be about the people who are around you who are suffering as much as you are. None of us can make it unless all of us make it.
Totally agree. Yeah, I do the spiritual work so that I can have more compassion and grace with myself. I think I'm speaking a lot about myself because I went so far away from abandoning myself and putting other people first that now I'm like, I've got to come back to me so that I can't, because I'm naturally giving, I'm naturally wanting to help, obviously at the extent of my naivety and getting taken advantage of by just vile people. But so I've had to like come
We're
back,
the easy marks.
you know?
Well, I want you to know, Kelly, it wasn't like I heard that in what you were saying. That's not what I was talking about at all. And believe me, I very much understand what you're saying. How did I let that person in the room? How was I gaslit? How was I vulnerable to that? Where was what I thought was love just a complete lack of sophistication and psychological astuteness? No, I understand completely.
Yeah. So I guess like in closing, I know this is probably a big question, but what gets me going is like the near-death experiences of like an Anita Morjani that reflect so many where people have, or, they dip their toe in that bliss, that source, that field of, omniscience and love and that surpasses human understanding and language. And then they come back, so they live a life without fear because they remember where they came from and where we're going back to. I mean, that's kind of the belief that I'm holding on to when drama hits me across the face and I get sucked down the river of victimhood for a second. And then I'm like, okay, wait, this is for my growth. I chose this. And like, how can I be a light in the world knowing that, this is all, you know, source. This is all love. Like get back to love, get back into alignment with that source. So what is your vision that keeps you centered? Like what's the game of life? Like why the heck are we here?
Well, we're here, we are ideas in the mind of God. We are love, and we are here to extend that love. So the atonement, the reconnection between us and God, but also between us and one another, can become complete. To kun olam, to repair the world, to fill in the breach. But we also want to remember that when you have those spontaneous enlightenment experiences, whether it was just a spontaneous thing, whether it was through a psychedelic, whether it was through a near-death experience, it's life taking you to the top of the mountain just to show you. It's not saying, here's the top of the mountain and you can live here forever. It's here's the top of the mountain. Now you're going to have to go back, but don't forget what you saw up here. Because you're going to have to climb. It doesn't mean the bills aren't going to have to get paid. It doesn't mean that other people aren't going to upset you. But that memory of, I know it's there, will fuel you and strengthen your faith and make you remember there is something to live up to here. And that is the journey, because I know where I'm going because I was there. I had that experience. So the grittiness of the human experience, truth is simple, but life is complicated. Truth is easy, but life is hard. And all of it's okay, to not try to keep the pain at bay, because like this stuff happens. And until we're perfect enlightened beings, we're going to have our blind spots. Obviously, you had a blind spot.
Big
Damn.
one. Yeah.
Big one, but that's Kelly. I don't know anyone who's not on the cross of these experiences right now. And we just have to hold on to each other real tightly and really be there to support one another. I appreciate the support you've given to me. And this is a moment of great possibility too. I know everybody's so upset right now, but this is also a moment, I believe, of real potential for regreening, rebirth, regeneration, if we keep our hearts open to one another. I believe that. I truly believe that.
I totally do too. I feel like it's just physics, equal and opposite reaction. We've gone so far off into the division, like there's just going to be and a disconnection from nature and our true nature. And we're going to come back. And like you said, this regreening, that's so beautiful.
That's right.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on and creating this
always great.
Beautiful
always
wisdom.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Always nice to see you. I wish you the best and good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Okay, honey. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Heal with Kelly podcast. Be sure to tune in every Thursday for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. And make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. Oh, and if you found this episode inspiring, please rate, review, and share Heal with Kelly so that we can grow our audience and reach more people. We truly appreciate it. Lots of love.